Hey everybody, Pat Benage here, the Evolution Coach, creator of the 6-Week Shift and the Inner Path, and author of this inspirational blog, SoulTalk. So, last week we talked about acceptance, and specifically about accepting responsibility for your life. And as I've often mentioned, acceptance is like the antidote for resistance. And so what I'm going to do is kind of take a step back and talk about resistance. And I've talked about it, several times. But what I want to talk about today is the fact that resistance really, it's the source of all suffering that you ever experience, that we ever experience. All of it is due to simply resistance. And so it's not due to whatever it is that we think is going on, whatever is happening to us or around us or any of that. It's our resistance to that that actually causes our own suffering. That doesn't mean, like, for example, I've been dealing with some low back pain and doing some things that have kind of aggravated it. And as we get older, things don't work quite as well as they used to. So that pain, there's definitely pain is there. And I have to be aware and make adjustments for that in order not to aggravate that. But the only time that I actually suffer from it is when I decide that I don't want it to be there. That I decide that somehow it's a problem. And see, resistance can be very, very, very subtle. And it can be, blatant and very covert, but it can, or overt, but it can also be very covert. It can be very subtle and just be a thought about something that starts this ball rolling, and it steamrolls into the point of our suffering because of this resistance. So, and let me just take this example of the low back pain a little bit further, because I think a lot of people end up being unhappy and end up feeling, miserable in their life because they're dealing with some sort of pain. It could be physical pain, it can be emotional pain, it can be all sorts of pain. But it's the resistance to that pain, because the pain is actually there to show you something. The pain's actually there to help you to notice something about your life that you need to change. Something that's not working. For example, my low back it's showing me that there's something about my own physical fitness level that needs some adjustment. It may just simply be that I need to go see the chiropractor and have an adjustment. But that's probably not going to alleviate the problem totally. There's a lifestyle thing that I have to change in order to get that alleviated. Sometimes it's a more structural problem that maybe needs to be fixed by surgery if you let it go that far. But the suffering only comes when I don't recognize the purpose of the pain. When I don't recognize that there is a purpose in it. If I, what happens is we tend to see it as something that's being done to us, whether we've done it to ourselves or whether it's being done by something else, or if it's an act of God, where we look at it as something that's to some degree outside of our control. We go to a doctor to have them fix it, or we take a pain pill to fix it, to mask it. And it's not that there's, a problem with those things, because there are times when they're important to utilize a doctor, a chiropractor, acupuncturist, certain drugs to alleviate the pain. There's nothing wrong with those things, but there's an underlying issue that caused it in the first place. And this is where we get into the deal, because one of the other things that, I find people that have trouble with is that, as I mentioned last week, accepting responsibility for everything in your life includes disease and pain and all of those things. You have to take responsibility, because we are responsible for that. At some point, we have set a cause in motion that created that experience, whatever the experience is. We've set that in motion at some point in our infinite lifespan. We've done that. And at that point, we were at first cause. What happens when you start resisting life is that now you've become second cause, because you are at the mercy of the effect of your first cause. And so you've sort of separated yourself from that first cause. You sort of said, I've forgotten about that. I've forgotten that I ever did that, created that. And so all you're seeing is the effect. And you see the effect, and then you react to that. And so even in that, you're resisting your responsibility. You're resisting your first cause. You're resisting the acceptance of responsibility for that. And so you can see that it can get very subtle, and this can get removed. You can be, 4, 5, or 10, or 20, or 100 times removed from your original cause, because you just keep reacting to the effects of it, and you create new things that aren't coming from your truth, but rather your illusion about what's happening. So you look at this effect that is a result of something you've put into motion, and then you react to that thinking that that's completely separate from you. You're not accepting responsibility, you're resisting responsibility, and you're looking at that as something that's happening to you. And then you react to that, and you make a choice based on something that's not even true, and you get another effect. A secondary effect from that second cause, and now you react to that. And this is how we get way off of our path. This is how we get lost in this illusion that we create. Simply because we forget that we are first cause. We forget that we set all of that in motion, because we've removed ourselves from that responsibility. And part of the process of evolving through consciousness is that we have to go in and understand this process, and then we have to accept responsibility for what we create. And all of it is our creation. All the experiences that I've ever had in all of my life have been created by me in some way. At some point in time, I've set something in motion that then produced the effect that then I made more choices with. And since you know, I don't believe in a mono life. I believe we're here many lifetimes, many physical lifetimes. So I set things in motion, and sometimes I don't work through that effect in the lifetime that I actually produced it. And so it carries over. And so some of the things that, you know, how you explain childhood trauma, childhood challenges, is they're coming through from a past life. They're coming through a previous lifetime, something that's been set in motion before this particular lifetime began. And that's karma. That's karma, good and bad. So sometimes it's, you know, you're born into a life that is just easy, you know. For a short period of I was born into an easy life until Mom died, and then, so, but some people, you know, it's like they've been handed a silver spoon. Well, they earned that through their own deeds in a previous life. But they still have the responsibility for the choices that they make in this life. And so if they abuse that in some way, if they don't appreciate that, if, you know, all those things are resisting as well. So you're resisting the truth of it. You know, if you start believing that you're special somehow above somebody else because of this privilege or this easy life, you know, that you're better than somebody else, that's a resistance to truth, and that also will cause issues. It might not cause you suffering in this life, but it'll, you know, it might. You don't know when that's going to manifest, but it will at some point. And so resistance is always, like I said, it's always at the source of all suffering. And if we can get into a place of non-resistance, no matter what shows up, you know, and I'll go back to my example in the beginning of my low back pain, and I just recently had a situation where I was having an interaction with somebody, and I just became really irritated at this person. And that's not like me to do that, but I recognized afterward that it was the pain that I was experiencing over the course of the day that was contributing to that. I was allowing that to contribute to that. Because I was resisting over time what's been happening with my low back. And it produced the result of me feeling more and more physical pain from it. And that ultimately affected my attitude. And afterward, I immediately recognized it and, you know, and owned up to it to that person that I was talking with. But what I have to realize is that something has to change about my lifestyle in order for me to get back to that place of balance, you know, and a place of non-resistance. So we're always seeking balance, you know, and there's a balance between resistance and acceptance that has to be maintained. You're working toward full acceptance, 100%. But as long as we're in the human consciousness, there are going to be some things that we're going to be resistant to. And that's okay as long as we recognize it and use it to then move through those things. And that's why what I mean by being in balance is that if we let that resistance drive us into a place of suffering, then we're out of balance. If we ignore it and suppress it, then we're, and just try to say, well, I'm not resisting anything and I'm just accepting everything. But if that's not true, then we're still resisting. We're resisting the truth. So it's finding that balance where you're working through your resistances to acceptance. And that's the key. That's the key. I don't know too many perfect people in terms of the perfection of always making the right choice. Always making the higher choice. We have triggers, all of us. And so we make those mistakes. And it's working through that matters. That's how we grow. That's how we grow. It's how we evolve. So I hope this has made sense and been beneficial for you. I so appreciate you. I say this all the time, but I really appreciate you just showing up. Just showing up, listening. You draw, I know this to be true, you draw out of me things that I wouldn't be able to express without you. So I appreciate you. And remember, live your life from the inside out. Keep your balance. Work through your resistance. Move toward acceptance. See you next week.